Hi guys, so today I'm going to be talking to you about capital punishment. Throughout time and history, we have heard of many cases of people cruelly taking another person's life or being heinous in many violent ways. We have seen people hurt victims and take away their right to have their future or to live their life and be with their family. We see crimes like this happen repeatedly. And throughout all these heinous crimes, we might ask ourselves, can these crimes be so horrible that someone should be sentenced to lose their life? As complex and layered the question could be, I believe the answer is yes. Capital punishment is a just form of punishment for those who commit heinous and cruel crimes, and it should be legal as it could be an appropriate sentence that protects society from the worst kinds of criminals and can be justified to victims or those affected by their crimes in some cases. In some cases, there are cruel, heinous crimes that deserve the highest form of punishment, and while it can be difficult to decide who truly deserves it, it can be an appropriate punishment when a justice system pulls these high forms of punishment. It is not only highlighting the significance of their actions, but enforces the standard that the law will hold those who do wrong accountable. When deciding if capital punishment is a correct sentence, I believe first and foremost that the punishment should fit the severity of the crime committed. It is important to understand that there can be a difference between getting justice and seeking revenge for things that were done. Someone being sentenced for their crimes is retributive justice because they are being held accountable for their actions that they chose for themselves. Researchers Anthony Walsh and Virginia Hatch discussed this idea in a 2018 article in the New Criminal Law Review. It is explained that the concept of just deserts, the saying meaning that punishment would be proportional to the harm caused by the offender. An offender getting their just deserts is only fitting when speaking about crimes that are intentionally heinous, such as murder, the murder of many victims, and torture. It's cases like these where the offender commits a violent offense that cannot be undone, where it should be reasonable that the punishment reflects the severity and permanency of the crime they committed. Philosopher Ernest van den Haag also brings the common argument to the defense of the punishment. Haag argues that retribution is its own moral justification for punishment. He states that the severity and the finality of the death penalty is appropriate to the seriousness and finality of the murder. It is appropriate to understand that the death penalty is the highest form of holding someone accountable for their crime, and is about justice, not necessarily revenge. The second reason to be in support of the capital punishment is that it would permanently rid society of a dangerous offender. It can be argued that there are other ways to completely incapacitate the offender, such as a life sentence without parole. This may keep them away from society and the public, however, it does not stop them from attempting violent acts. In a 2018 Virginia Law Review article, the law professor Mara Stith McLeod states that a prisoner serving a life sentence will still pose a risk of violence to the people around them in a correctional facility. With capital punishment, there would be no possibility that this person could harm another life. In the article, The Case Against the Death Penalty, Chad Flanders argues the theories of punishment traditionally will provide justification for punishment. And one of these justifications is that execution will completely incapacitate the offender, how no other punishment will. This argument does not mean that the death penalty should be given to every murderer. It is not one size fits all. However, most dangerous offenders will commit crimes reaching new levels that should be met with the death penalty to protect those around them. The third reason I support the death penalty is because justice and accountability can be very important for victims and the victims' families. Executing the offender cannot guarantee closure for a family, however. Executing a murderer would bring justice for families. Researchers Marilyn Peterson Armour and Mark Umbria specifically studied the homicide survivors and have found their reaction. Executions can be very different, while some may have felt relief and felt content. Others continue to struggle with grief. The research did also show that survivors' view on whether the offender's punishment was adequate can directly affect their stress. Understanding the difference is very significant because justice doesn't mean that a family will stop being sad or grieving, but it does mean that society and the courts recognize the severity of the crime, and the person is correctly held accountable. To conclude, I do understand that human life always holds value, but with that, we must understand that taking away an innocent person's life on purpose is very serious. Capital punishment is a complex subject. However, it should be put in effect when it deserved, and when someone intentionally commits a cruel and heinous act, I believe that person decides to forfeit their life, and with that, capital punishment would be fitting. And like I said before, while it is not one size fits all, it can be fitting for the most heinous and violent crimes. Thank you, guys.